You won't find a more thoroughly researched 7-round Arizona Cardinals mock draft than what you're about to see. I am Joe, aka the Professor, aka the Cardinal Rule, aka TCR, aka whatever, and I'm going to go over in just a minute how I went about preparing this mock draft. But let me tell you, last year I did the same thing, and 2 of the players I identified were actually drafted by the Cardinals, Garrett Williams and Keitrell Clark. And as mock drafts go, that's actually a really good hit rate. It's really tough to predict what teams are going to do, and especially when you consider that neither of those were a slam dunk first round pick. So let me go over how I prepared for this mock draft. Now, the first thing that I did in preparation for this mock draft is I've done a thorough analysis of what I project to be Monty Austinfort's likely draft strategy. I did a video on this last year. There's a link to it below. And this chart you see right here is the core idea in that video. I looked at the front offices Monty Austinfort was part of before he joined the Arizona Cardinals, the New England Patriots, and the Tennessee Titans. And I looked at the draft patterns during the time he was in the front office there. The idea being that although he didn't make those decisions, this is where he sort of learned his processes. This is where he learned how to be a GM. Now, he may deviate from this. He's going to have his own ideas, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that the processes he learned there are going to largely inform what he does. Now, this chart, as much as folks in my Discord like to joke about calling it the almighty chart, is just a guide. It's just a general idea of a strategy. He at some point may take a pick that's outside of this chart. I will note though, last year, all the picks he made fit within this chart. Now, with that in mind, you don't want to look at this too rigidly. You're more just looking for general patterns. For example, they never took interior offensive linemen before the 3rd round. In fact, if you look closely, the 4th round is a real hot spot. They really seem to like to take guards and centers at the beginning of day 3 of the draft. Linebackers in the 6th round is another hot spot. They seem to like to take cornerbacks both early, somewhere in between rounds 1 and 3, and then again late in rounds 6 and 7. So there's these general ideas and patterns that I use to inform my mock draft. Some of my picks may have gone just a little bit outside of that. I'll give you a hint. There was one position that didn't fit this on my mock. But overall, I did use this to inform the general approach towards where you take certain positions. Another thing that went into this mock draft is I paid attention to player visits and meetings with the Arizona Cardinals. I've kept my own list based on the things that have been reported online, and although I didn't go strictly by this list, you will note that a lot of the players I draft were players that the Cardinals either had a visit with or a meeting with or some sort of connection with online. Finally, I do look at scheme fits, especially at the offensive line position. The Cardinals run sort of a wide zone offense, although they mix in other types of zone runs. So when you look for offensive linemen, you're looking for athletic offensive linemen who can pull and be a good fit for that wide zone offense. So in general, I at least try to have some sort of thought of how this player might fit into what the Cardinals do. So let's get into the mock draft. Now, at the top, we have pick 4 in the 1st round. Now, there's been a lot of uncertainty about what the Cardinals are going to do there. Are they going to stick and pick? Are they going to trade back? I think it could go either way, and I think it's not determined yet what Monty's going to do. I think he's going to wait and see how things play out. There is a scenario where I think they trade back, and even a potential scenario where they trade back and then trade up again like they did last year. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the stick and pick here. I think that's just slightly more likely right now based on what we've seen and heard, but I think it's very close. I really think it's like 60-40, 40% likelihood they trade, 60% they stick and pick. So with pick 4, no surprise here, I'm going with Marvin Harrison Jr. The obvious pick of the wide receiver out of Ohio State. He's 21 years old, 6'4", 205, has amazing athleticism, has everything you're looking for, is truly an elite prospect at a position of need for the Cardinals. Now, if there is some sort of trade back scenario, I would project Rome Odunze as the pick here, but with a stick and pick, to me, it seems obvious that it's Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, the Cardinals have pick 27 in the 1st round, but this is where I am going to project a trade. Monty Austinfort accumulated a lot of draft capital in his trades last year, and they've got 3 3rd-round picks. And while it is possible they may use all those picks, I do think there's a good potential for them to use some of that capital as ammunition to move up here. And when you look at the players the Cardinals visited with, there's a number of players that seem like they're going to be going in the teens. Now, maybe the Cardinals met with them in the hopes that they would fall to 27, but I do think a trade up from 27 to try to get one of the players they really covet is absolutely a possibility. So I projected a trade in which the Cardinals gave up pick 27 in the 1st round and pick 71 in the 3rd round to move up to pick 18 from the Cincinnati Bengals. But if you think that wasn't enough and you want to say they gave a pick 66 instead of pick 71, or you want to say they traded up to pick 19 or 20 instead of pick 18, it's really not important exactly which pick we look at here. We're just projecting this is roughly where they're looking to trade up to. And I think generally speaking, this is a realistic kind of scenario. So after trading up to somewhere in the late teens, early 20s, I am predicting the Cardinals would take Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama. He's one of the players they met with. He's one of the top cornerbacks in his class. Now, maybe he doesn't fall that far. He could be the first cornerback off the board. They met with 3 first-round cornerbacks, Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, and Terrion Arnold. So maybe instead of Arnold, it's one of those other 2 cornerbacks. But the point being, I have a projection of them trading up to go after one of those players they met with who's going to be gone by the time they get to pick 27. Arnold has great sizes, 6 foot 196. He's 21 years old, and he projects to be that number 1 cornerback that they really need in that room. Next up, we have pick 35 in the second round. Now, the Cardinals have met with a lot of edge rushers, guys like Jared Verse and Chop Robinson, but I think most of those guys are going to be gone by the time they get to 35. Now, if they do stay at 27 and they don't trade up, edge rusher could be the position they go instead of cornerback there. But in this scenario, at pick 35, I have the Cardinals taking edge rusher Chris Braswell. So this is back-to-back picks out of Alabama for the Cardinals in this scenario, and Braswell would likely be the second edge rusher taken out of Alabama this year after Dallas Turner. He's 22 years old, 6'3", 255, and has been a productive pass rusher for the Crimson Tide. Pass rush is a major area of need for the Cardinals, and Braswell, a player who the Cardinals did meet with, could be a nice fit in that room. Next, we come to the third round, pick 66, and I am going with another edge rusher here, but I'm going with a specific player for a particular reason. At pick 66, I have the Cardinals taking edge rusher Gabriel Murphy out of UCLA. Murphy's 24 years old. He's 6'3", 260 pounds, but there's a specific reason I took him, and I tweeted about this a while back. In an ESPN article looking at various prospects and prospects that did certain things well, Gabriel Murphy was identified as the best pass rusher on stunts. And in that profile, they compared him to Kyle Van Noy. Now, the reason that stood out to me is because the Kyle Van Noy comp is what I think the Cardinals have been trying to do with Zaven Collins this year. A versatile edge rusher who sometimes plays a run, sometimes plays more like an off-ball linebacker, but also sometimes rushes the passer and does stunts. Van Noy has been that kind of player. Versatile, sort of an inside-out player. And if that's what they've been looking to do with Zaven Collins, and he's on the last year of his rookie deal, it would make sense to draft someone like Murphy to sort of be his replacement when he does move on, which I think, sadly, is probably likely. We'll see. But this player fit just makes a lot of sense to me based on what Murphy does well and what the Cardinals are looking to do with at least one of their edge rusher positions. Now, with the trade that I projected, moving pick 71, the next pick for the Cardinals is actually pick 90 in the third round. And when you look at the Cardinals player visits, in addition to the top 3 receivers, they've met with a lot of receivers who seem like they're going to go somewhere in the 3rd, 4th round, maybe a little bit later. And when you look at the receiver room for the Cardinals, they need some receivers, more than just one. So at pick 90, I've projected the Cardinals to take wide receiver Jacob Cowing from Arizona. Cowing is 23 years old. He's 5'11", 175, and he is a player the Cardinals met with. Now, I know some Cardinals fans are tired of small receivers. It seemed like we took a ton of them in the second round for years on end, but you do want to have 1 or 2 of those little shifty receivers on your roster. And Cohen provides a nice contingency in case Greg Dortch moves on after his 1-year deal that he just signed. Now, if you're a Cardinals fan, obviously you like to keep him around, but if you're Monty Austinforth, the GM, you have to be prepared for the potential that someone else would offer Dortch a contract next year that's bigger than what you're willing to match. If that were to happen, Cohen would be a nice replacement once Dortch had moved on. Next, we get to the 4th round, pick 104. And if you remember, based on that chart I showed you, the 4th round is a hot spot for interior offensive linemen. If you look last year, that's when they drafted Jonathan Gaines II. So with that in mind, I do have the Cardinals taking an interior offensive lineman. And the player I have them selecting is Wisconsin center Tanner Bortolini. Bortolini is 21 years old. He's 6'4", 310 pounds. And let me get this out of the way. I know some people are going to watch this and say that this is a reach. He's ranked 212th on PFF's big board, and I have him going all the way up at pick 104, and I get that. But a couple things we need to note here. First of all, player rankings on day 3 are kind of all over the board. It really just matters who teams like and what traits they value. But the more important thing here is you have to look at Tanner Bortolini's athleticism. Now, if you follow the draft closely, you've probably seen this tweet by now from Josh Norris. He put it out last year talking about how the shuttle drill is sort of this cheat code for finding good offensive linemen. Offensive linemen that record a score of 4.47 or better have a high rate of success in the NFL. And if you look at Jonathan Gaines, the offensive lineman the Cardinals took in the 4th round last year, he was within that threshold. And Tanner Bortolini is way under that threshold. His shuttle time is 4.28. That is crazy good. And if you look at the rest of his athleticism on his relative athletic score, everything grades as elite except for his size. So while PFF may have him ranked at 212, I think he's going to go a lot earlier than that, and I could absolutely see Monty Austinfort, based on the way he looks for offensive linemen and the traits he was looking for, looking at Bortolini's athleticism and deciding that this is the guy they want to take a shot on to develop as a future starting center for them. Next, we have pick 138 in the 5th round. And here I have the Cardinals taking interior defensive lineman Christian Boyd. Christian Boyd is 24 years old. He's 6'4", 317 pounds, played at Northern Iowa. Now, the Cardinals did sign multiple interior defensive linemen in free agency this year, but they could still look to add someone, especially someone with upside like Boyd. Next up, we have pick 162, also in the 5th round. Now, this is a place where I deviated a little bit from the almighty chart. The chart typically has running backs going earlier, anywhere between rounds 1 and 4, but here in the 5th round, I'm going running back with Ray Davis out of Kentucky. Davis is 24 years old. He's 5'10", 260 pounds, and he is a player that the Cardinals met with. Davis would be a nice addition to a room that currently features James Conner, Michael Carter, and Amari DiMarcado. Now we get to pick 186 in the 6th round. This is another pick where I use the chart to identify a hot spot where I think Monty Austinfort's going to pick a particular position. And what I've gone with here is linebacker Jordan McGee. McGee is a linebacker out of Temple. He's 6'3", 225 pounds. Couldn't find an age on him online, but my best guess is he's probably around 24 years old. And the reason I went with McGee here in particular is because of his athleticism. If you look at his RAS score, aside from his size, he has really good athleticism. And you may remember last year the Cardinals in the 6th round took another athletic linebacker in Owen Pappoe. Now McGee isn't as athletic as Pappoe was. Pappoe is sort of a freak in terms of his testing numbers. He's still tested really well in his own right. And while the Cardinals did sign a free agent linebacker, this is an area where they need to continue adding depth and building for the future. Now finally, we get to the 7th round, pick 226. And here I have the Cardinals taking tight end Trey Knox. Trey Knox, again, couldn't find age on him online, but he's probably somewhere around 24. He played at South Carolina. He's 6'5", 237 pounds. And there were reports that the Cardinals met with Knox virtually. Now, even though Trey McBride has emerged as a star at tight end, the Cardinals could use some depth here. And Knox could be a nice player to round out that room. So to recap, here's my mock draft for the Arizona Cardinals for 2024. At pick 4, I have Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver. At pick 18, I have Terrion Arnold, cornerback. At 35, I have edge rusher Chris Braswell. At 66, edge Gabriel Murphy. At pick 90, wide receiver Jacob Cowing. At pick 104, center Tanner Bortolini. At pick 138, defensive tackle Christian Boyd. At pick 162, running back Ray Davis. At pick 186, Jordan McGee, linebacker. And at pick 226, Trey Knox, tight end. So who are some of the players you think the Cardinals are going to take a shot on? Is there anyone you've just got this feeling they're going to take somewhere in this draft? Let me know in the comments below. And also, please be sure to click like and subscribe for more Arizona Cardinals content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Cardinal Rule.